The dangers of flying during Muslims. On March 26 of this year, Hassan al-Diwachi was returning from a scientific conference in Vienna, and was looking forward to see his family as he took his seat on the flight to Gatwick. He sent a text message to his wife to inform her that the plane was delayed. A woman sitting across the aisle got up and left her. A few moments later, the police arrived. The Sheffield Hallam Cancer native was easier to get off the plane and was detained for 4 hours after his phone had been conferenced to a sleeper was left at airport without any tickets or refunds. The reason his message was in Arabic. The story of al-Diwachi. This is just one example of the dangers of what has come to light. To fly while a Muslim on the head is a term to discriminate against many passengers. Muslims feel they've been confronted at airports since September 11. This can range from additional questions from the airport to official police searches, to secondary security checks and visa issues when visiting America. Sometimes it seems like every Muslim has a story to tell. Faiza Shaheen reads about Syria. Twitter photo 2 weeks ago. A Muslim couple celebrating their 1-year anniversary. Wedding anniversary was on a flight from France to the United States. A crew member allegedly complained that 3-year-old Nazi Ali, who wears a headscarf on her head, was using her cell phone and her husband Faisal was sweating. The flight attendant allegedly also complained that the couple used the word Allah. The airline in question in the letter has stated that they are deeply committed to treating to all of our customers respectfully. Other examples this summer include a psychiatric worker NHS Faiz Ulan, who was returning from honeymoon when she was detained and interrogated by police under the Terrorism Act's 7th Amendment schedule. The crew of her outbound flight said they had a place she'd read the Book of Assyria. Shaheen said the experience left her in tears. Thomson Airlines said our crew is trained to report any problems they may have as a precautionary measure. The stories that have made in the headline are often similar to Alway or Chance, where the normal behavior of Muslim passengers is seen as suspicious, is more common, but less common are the everyday stories of innocent passengers who feel that they are under suspicion solely because of their religious equality. And Willie Birdie's band betray that the net is now cast so wide that it's music producer Noti Boy and comedian Adil Ray have complained of discriminatory treatment at airports. This month, actor and rapper Lance Rice Ahmed released a single called T5 about the problems he faces on flights. al-Diwachi, who has been living in the UK since 2010, is still shaken by his "Everyone looked at me and assumed that I'd done something wrong. It's not vigilant, but it's a stereotype." He says he has received any apology from the Austrian police, and says that in addition to being, he was told that a female passenger reported seeing something related to ice. He was given no further explanations. The biomedical scientist finally received an apology and a refund from EasyJet after his story was published in the al-Diwachi newspaper. Believes that the focus on terrorism in the media attention hasn't helped. People who know me are amazed. I'm calm and cool. They can't understand why anyone would look at me and is afraid to compare it to something in my area. It's like swine flu. Always someone thought they had it because they've heard so much about that Kin Maxuma can sympathize with. In April, a 20-year-old boy was on his way back to his university in California when called his uncle in Iraq to tell him that he had been invited to an official inside that Ban Ki-moon would be in attendance. Ban Ki-moon, he even asked a question. The UN Secretary-General, the woman in front of him. He reported him, and Maxuma was asked to leave the plane, confronted by police officers, and his bag was searched in front of the other passengers. The politician says the airline manager of the airline told him that he should have known that speaking the language posed a security risk. Nevertheless, So2 Airlines released a statement saying that it was the content of his words that was taken as threatening, not his use of language. In March, London-based DJ Harry Mathis Force was removed from a flight from Rome because a passenger said they didn't feel safe traveling with him. Mantis Fa Georges, a black man, said he was a victim of racial profiling. Music producer Noti Boy Photo Enris, the Guardian, accomplice with London Lau Abiyi, a Christian man of Nigerian, was asked to leave after another passenger saw a prayer, a group text message with the word E, abbreviation for iron sharpens iron. Biblical. A quote earlier this month by Gwyd Mensah, a professor of economics at Pennsylvania, who has curly, dark hair, was kicked off an airplane in the U.S. after an equation he wrote disturbed a female passenger in the U.S. So many Sikhs have been subjected to additional screening because of their clothing that Sikhs are wearing. Coalition launched an app to publicize cases of discrimination. Katie Xian, a professor at York University who researches the problems Sikhs face at airports, says the problem is high. Lycée as brown male bodies involved in the war on terror wear appropriate clothing. Illustration of Sun Lana Folia. When I asked family and friends about their experiences of flying while a Muslim, the stories became thick and fast. A friend counted the service members and questioned. The Guardian's editor was stopped and questioned 4 of the 7 times he traveled to the US, including he was asked about training camps in the Middle East. A relative who lives in UK and holds both US passports and UK stays 80% of my trips to or within the US, and I travel there about 5 or 6 times a year. It started shortly after 11. Row at the Minnesota interchange, a police officer asked him to confirm the name and then to accompany him for questioning. When I asked him what it was about, he said that the pilot said I was belligerent. On the flight, I immediately went to the point of being as American as possible. I said something like, "Yo, man. It's completely ridiculous. I wasn't. I was talking to." I said he seemed like a nice guy. But it was Russian profiling when I said that. Apologized and said that his boss told him to check up on me now that he was arriving early for flights to the US to accommodate an extra security check. One live, they told me it was a random selection, and when I asked what he's based on, they said name, age, ethnicity. In Turkey they told me that I have the same name as the son of a terrorist and that the US shares with them their watch list. I always put "fo" in short because the way they treat you is horrible. I think I'm practically a Boy Scout if I don't say anything. Who will be Hugh Handy side of the American Civil Liberties Union. ACLU explains that repeatedly having SSSS secondary security choice CRING printed on your boarding pass is a strong indicator that your name is on a subset of the government's terrorism watch list. The US. Sometimes it's enough to have a name similar to someone on the list. The database. By database must contain hundreds of thousands of names, and the secrecy surrounding it is very controversial. In April, a branch of the Cairo Council on American Islamic Relations in Michigan has launched a class action lawsuit on behalf of thousands of innocent American NS who have been improperly labeled as known or suspected terrorists without due process, in another lawsuit seeking a declaration that the watch list is unconstitutional. Handy's website says that the ACU lawsuits have shown that traveling in parts of the country in a particular year was cited as reasons for inclusion in another under the multiple watch list. For flights in 2014, leaked data showed that people of Muslim origin were disproportionately represented on the list, while New York is the most Nablus in Michigan. As Handy notes, the Dearborn site is the center of the highest concentration of people of Arab outside of the Middle East, using algorithms to determining who additional screening makes the system even more opaque. An attorney who spent 2 years working for the CIA says the sheer number of people means that watch lists don't make us safer. It increases the size of a haystack. If you win, it's that much harder to find. It immeasurably increases the white noise for cases of mistaken identity. There's a system of reimbursement that is encased in secrecy, and the only way to know if you've succeeded is to fly again. Sampaio. To complain about your treatment at airports. The stigma of being accused of terrorism, even if the accusations aren't, may be enough to silence many others. Fear a negative reaction from authorities. The Handy site says that those who easily dismiss such experiences don't always realize how much damage it can do. We cannot underestimate how much through it every time, so that everyone looks at you and think you're a terrorist. Imam Ajmal Masroor was so mind-boggling with his own treatment at the airport that he created a website to collate stories of other people traveling to the States, and of them several times. In 2015 he was stopped by U.S. Embassy officials at the airport in December and suddenly told that his business visa had been revoked. Masroor, 44, who says that in the past he has received death threats for speaking out against terrorism, explains that he was eventually told that the problem was with someone on his Facebook page, but I have 30,000 followers, so I don't know who it is. And despite a letter from the State Department saying the recall was a mistake, he says the visits to the U.S. Embassy have not remedied the situation, with one of the politicians trying to find out the extent of the problem is MP Stella Crisis. She's been asking questions about problems U.S. Homeland Security after a family of 11 from her constituency were stopped at the airport when they were on their way to Disneyland. The family lost $13,340 for missing their flights, which they were told would not be reversed. The trauma, of course, is impossible to quantify. Their ESTA visa was revoked. The children cried. They had to return everything they bought from duty free. It was awful. Why don't you tell them before they get to the airport? Give them extra time to clear. Security illustration of Alan Foley's son. When she heard similar stories from other voters, she asked questions in Parliament, but she was not told any figures about how many British citizens are not proved to be visiting the US at the same time. While the UK authorities publish ARCH data disaggregated by ethnic affiliation, the US is less transparent. There is evidence that national security officers are working at the airports, Manchester, Tweek and Heathrow, but under what auspices is unclear. She said, if we can and will either investigate or do something about it, but the government doesn't know, and that should be of worrying. Now she's hoping to start a court case challenging the government over the lack of figures, insisting that it's a failure to fulfill their duty to ensure equality in the public. No one is suggesting that there shouldn't. There should be checks. The problem is the lack of information and the scrutiny of the U.S. Embassy emphasized that religion, faith or spiritual beliefs are not determinants of U.S. admissibility. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has confirmed that it has not disclosed the percentage of travelers selected for secondary screening or a breakdown of their numbers by ethnicity. However, a spokesman said the numbers were almost insignificant in comparison to the 6 crowd of travelers arriving from Britain every day. CNN SP Hamza Yusuf with party leader Nicola and Sturgeon. Photo of Days Lawson Pa. Although the UK may hold data for stop and search at airports, it doesn't means there are no problems at 2012 Glasgow Airport faced a boycott by Muslim passengers who said they were sick of being subjected harassment by counter-terrorism officers. A year earlier, Scottish MSP Hamza Yusuf reported that he was stopped under 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000. It was not the first time he had been stopped under the original legislation of that act to be stop and frisk anyone entering or leaving. The UK can be detained for up to 3 hours without any grounds for suspicion. At the height of its in the 1990s, 85,000 travelers a year were stopped, and ethnic minorities are 42 times more likely to be stopped than white passengers. Yusuf said that his frequent stops illustrate that they're based on skin color rather than on intelligence information. In the year after much criticism, there were a change in the law regarding scheduling. 7 stops required. The presence of an attorney was required, and the maximum term of detention was reduced to 6 hours, which led to a dramatic drop in those who have been stopped. The latest available data shows a much lower number. In 2015, a drop of 21% from the previous year. David Anderson, independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, says that this is partly due to an increased focus on data and behavioral, and a decreased reliance on intuitive stops. Anderson doesn't believe that statistics show that the Schedule 7 powers is being used in a discriminatory way. Although he admits that the stops cause significant annoyances for travelers of all ethnicities, while arrest rates do remain very low by stop and search standards, and the justices of the Supreme Court reviewed his analysis, and while 4 agreed, 1 believed that paragraph 7 not only allows for direct discrimination, it is completely contrary to the notion of an enlightened, pluralistic, Illustration by Alan Fall's son this year. The Iran government. New guidance indicating that the decision to stop someone should not be arbitrary, and that ethnicity and religion should only be considered relevant in relation to factors that show a connection to the threat of terrorism. According to an analysis of data for 2015 ME organizations by of the population is non-white at least 37 times more likely than whites to be apprehended at a port or airport, Asians are nearly 80 times more likely than a white person to will be detained at an airport or port, along with the anecdotal evidence. They say this shows a significant level of profiling that requires urgent action to ensure equal treatment of UK nationals and non-UK nationals. UK nationals and non-UK nationals visiting the UK